Welcome to EB5 Investment Voice, where attorney insights intersects with immigration investments. If you are a foreign investor, domestic fund manager, or enterprising entrepreneur and want to get the most out of the EB5 program, you have come to the right place. I'm Mark Deal, and I'll be your co-host on this journey. I'm joined by your host, Mona Shah, and other attorneys at Mona Shah & Associates, as well as immigration leaders from around the world. So let's get into EB5 Investment Voice. Hello and welcome back to EB5 Investment Voice. Today we have a very special guest, Atlantic City Councilman Frank Gilliam. Frank, Mona, and I are going to be talking about Atlantic City and why the timing may be perfect for both EB5 developers and investors. Before we get too far into it, I'd like to introduce you to your host, Mona Shah. Mona, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Mark. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Hot here in Atlanta, just like I know, pretty warm in New York. I was just there.
It's a bit humid, actually. But anyway, we're very thankful that we have Frank here on the show today. And really, without much ado, I'm going to ask Frank to speak and introduce himself. Frank.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me, Mona, and also thank you, Mark. My name is Frank Gilliam. I'm Councilman At-Large in Atlantic City. I'm in my second term, and I'm pretty excited about the EB5 concept and moving forward. At the same time, I'm also excited about being here because Mona is one of the premier law firms in EB5. So thank you, Mona.
Well, thank you for that, Frank. Well, as you heard, Frank is very excited about EB5, but there's something a little unusual about Frank. Unlike some of the developers that we've had on the show, Frank is a politician. Frank, what's your current position?
I'm a councilman at large in the city of Atlantic City.
Okay. And is that an elected position?
Yes, it's an elected position. We get elected 4 years to each term. I'm in my second term. At the same time, I'm also the chair of Planning and Development. So EB5 and Planning and Development goes hand in hand.
Wow. So here we have somebody who's actually in a city. And Mark, I know you're sitting in Georgia. Have you ever been to Atlantic City in South Jersey?
I have once long ago. It's been quite a while, but I did have a good time while I was there.
Well, you have to come back real soon.
Well, for all of our listeners who are overseas, Atlantic City is a little mini version of Las Vegas up in the Northeast. And it suffered, unfortunately, with a little downturn recently because of, why did it suffer, Frank?
We're talking about maybe 3 or 4 years. We had Superstorm Sandy that came through, and then with a couple casinos closing, that also put a little blemish on the town. But the town is very resilient. It has always been resilient. Every town has its ebbs and flows, and I think that we're back in position to be becoming another area of flowing. Atlantic City is on the southeast end of New Jersey. We pretty much have the same comparables as something more or less of Miami. I also think that we have some of the most beautiful beaches and boardwalks. Most people know Atlantic City for the fact that it is known for the infamous boardwalk.
Yeah, and, I love that boardwalk.
Well, I love the boardwalk itself, yeah.
And believe it or not, Atlantic City has basically suffered a little turmoil, but when you basically get to Atlantic City, you see that the town is still vibrant. We still basically receive over 26 million visitors a year. On any given day, we'll have at least 100,000 to 200,000 people visiting. And again, I'm just looking forward to the resurrection of Atlantic City. As we mentioned earlier, some of the casinos closed. I looked at that as a great idea. I don't think that a town of 48 blocks was really intended to have 12 casinos. So I think we're downsizing to the right number. And I think that as we basically move forward, those casinos that still exist, they'll flourish, but new opportunities will basically be on the horizon.
Wow, yeah. Well, Frank, you've only recently been introduced to EP5 funding, and we haven't really begun to raise funds for Atlantic City, but there's lots of plans ahead. Are these plans, do they include the city? Is this going to be sort of a quasi-governmental type partnership?
I think there'll be a combination. I think it's opportunities there for public-private venture as well as governmental partnerships. The city has an inventory of maybe 700 plus parcels. I think as those parcels become a realistic vision in terms of making sure we designate certain areas for zoning and so on and so forth, those parcels will become very intricate part of Atlantic City revitalization because some city-owned properties are beachfront, some city-owned properties are bayfront. We also have boardwalk frontage. So I think that as the city begins to look at its vision moving forward in terms of how we want certain areas designated for certain purposes, I think the EB5 world would be very interested in looking at Atlantic City and its potential.
Mark, aren't you impressed now? We've had every type of area. We've discussed Atlantic City before when we talked about, I think we mentioned the Polar Coaster on one of the episodes. But look, we brought EB5 funds into transportation, we brought EB5 funds into real estate, and now here it is to revitalize a city.
Exactly. And a city in itself is complex. And as Frank just noted, Atlantic City has a lot of many facets to it, from the casinos to the boardwalk. So unlike other EB5 projects, you really have a whole gambit of activities that would be enabled with EB5 as well as other funds. I know that Frank mentioned the 70 plus partials and other ways in which to get some financing to help out revitalizing Atlantic City. So, yeah, it does sound very interesting indeed.
And, Mark, if I can correct you, that's 719.
719. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, and Frank, just to let you know, you'll probably have to correct me many times on this show because that's what I do. I get things wrong, and then people correct me, and hopefully the person listening is the wiser for it.
No problem.
Yeah, so here we have EB5 funds and a city. But if we have any investors who are actually listening, and Frank, we have had quite a few people from overseas who are actual investors, and they're listening because they want to know a bit more about EB5, and they're listening to all the different types of projects and the developments and stuff that we are putting over. How would you give that person a little bit of confidence as to the usage of the money and where it's going to? And what is very important to them, the return of their capital after a certain amount of time.
I think Atlantic City is a sure bet. It's a sure bet because you're basically living and producing an entity near the water. Most folks don't realize that Atlantic City is still somewhat a blank canvas. You can bring your second home. You can bring your corporate offices there. One of the exciting things is that we actually have a $212 million investment right now going on with South Jersey Industries, which is our leading energy companies building their corporate office there. We also have Stockton University that's building their campus there. So it's a very great time to basically invest in the city. More importantly, we've had over 26 different languages that are spoken in our schools. The town is very diverse. I think it's more or less ready for Asian town. I'm very excited about creating that kind of project. I think any time that you are able to display multifacets of ethnicities that a town has, I think that brings a lot more excitement. So I'm very bullish on Atlantic City. And if I was an outsider investing, I would basically be looking at Atlantic City as my first choice.
Oh, you have a twin sister in China, I believe. Guangzhou.
Guangzhou, yes. We have a sister city, yes. And that became very fruitful as well. We also created exchange program, meaning that students from, I think it's Langdon University, they'll be able to come over to Atlantic City's campus. We wrote up a MOU with the government as well as with the university, allowing any student from that province to pretty much be utilized or looked at as a New Jersey resident, meaning that there will be at least $5,000 to $7,000 savings because they are considered a sister city.
So for any developer who's listening and they're thinking at all of coming into Atlantic City, are there tax credits? Is there any incentives from the government for coming in?
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, Atlantic City is one of probably only 3 municipalities that have the luxury of a Grow New Jersey. Grow New Jersey is you, as an investor, getting 40% of your investment back. If you couple
40%?
40%.
Whoa, what does that mean?
That means that Atlantic City is a prime area for redevelopment. It also has a tax credit called the ERG. So any full-time employee that the developer brings actually gets $10,000 per person. That's not for 1 year, that's for 10 years.
Wow, that's a lot.
It sounds like a developer coming in not only gets a tax credits for their development, which could help offset some of the initial construction costs, but the full-time jobs, they also get some benefit from that?
Yes, they get a $10,000 tax credit.
Wow.
Yeah. That's
great. And that couples in nicely with the whole motivation behind EB5, and that's to create full-time jobs. So it sounds like a win-win, a nice marriage there.
Right. Well, this is the reason that from the very inception, we've been very excited about doing work with Atlantic City, because we're always out there to try and find something which not only is good for the investor, but is also good for the country. And yes, of course, the great big hotels, when they go up, that's another hotel. But when you're actually doing something like revitalizing a city, bringing jobs, bringing something back, and unfortunately, that poor place did get hammered hard by Sandy, and it bounced back, but it's taken a little time.
You're absolutely right, Mona. I think that the housing stock and the business stock of Atlantic City is pretty much 55 years and older. I think that as we begin to reface and reevaluate what the city wants to look like, I think we can start off with the boardwalk, creating new business ventures on the boardwalk. If you were to look at the Monopoly board, it actually will tell you what the valuable pieces of Atlantic City are. And it actually...
Frank, I had a fight with somebody because I said, no, boardwalk originated from the UK. You have all the British pieces. And apparently I was wrong. It actually originated from Atlantic City.
Absolutely. That's an interesting thing. If Milton Bradley is listening, we would like Milton Bradley to pretty much give Atlantic City some kind of statue or some kind of marker that shows that this is where that actual game created. And believe it or not, I look at that game, and it's really a game of life, because when you begin to look at the pieces on the board and you begin to look at the city, some of those areas of the city have lost value. But from a marketing standpoint and an investment standpoint, they are in the most prominent places in the city. So, for example, when you talk about boardwalk frontage, you're talking about probably one of the most infamous streets in the country.
Right. Well, that also brings me to another point. We've been discussing this a lot lately, Mark, that people who are coming in, the investment coming in, yes, you have the EP5 investment, which is wonderful for the country, but people are coming in and they're buying real estate, and they're also investing some capital into the country, and they're looking for good investments. And I have just recently read and heard how good the real estate is right now to purchase around Atlantic City, because it's not that expensive yet, and it has a lot of potential.
For the investors looking in real estate, I think it's a very prominent time to invest in Atlantic City. The market price won't stay the same. I believe that you can get waterfront property somewhere around $20 to $25 square foot. That's almost unheard of.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm chuckling because it is unheard of.
Right, and you can also get bayfront property somewhere between $15 and $20 a square foot. So if you are lovers of nature and you love the sunset and you love the sunrise and sunset over the water, Atlantic City is probably an ideal place. Again, whenever markets have a downturn, it's always a great opportunity to come in, because you don't get these prices too much. And I think that at some point, I can't predict, I'll say between now and maybe a year or two later, those prices will no longer be existent, especially when Stockton and South Jersey Gas begin their construction.
Yeah, there's a lot of things which are going to raise the prices of the housing in Atlantic City, other than whatever revitalization EP5 brings. But tell us a little bit more about Stockton University.
Stockton University, currently, they are the largest environmental university in the country. They actually started in Atlantic City. They started in a little storefront on St. James and the Boardwalk. They ended up moving to a town called Pomona. They've grown so large that they no longer are allowed to build in Pomona, because in and around the campus is a pinelands reserve. So with the growth of this university and the insight and the vision of Harvey Kesselman, which is the president, he actually had an appetite to bring the campus back to the city. Me being an alumnus of the university, that was a no-brainer. Before, we had tried to put it in the old casino Showboat. That deal didn't fall through, but then we ended up finding a much better location, which is the west end of the city. It's actually in the thoroughway of Route 40 coming into Atlantic City. It'll have a campus, but believe it or not, the campus is going to be on the old Atlantic City site. But what better way to enjoy a college education?
I'm going to that college if I can go back to college.
Absolutely, because the next piece that I'm about to tell you is going to blow your mind. The dorms are going to be beachfront.
That's not fair.
Dormitory.
All right, that's not fair.
So I told the president, as you just said, that I'm coming back to school. There's no way that, and I believe that Atlantic City, Stockton University will probably be one of two universities that actually have a campus on the beach.
amazing. That would be just amazing. But saying that, Stockton University is not one which had too much publicity earlier. And now that it has grown and it's got to the stage it is, I believe they themselves also have an EP5 project. We have like several coming out of Atlantic City, one from Stockton University, one for the water taxis, bringing transportation down, and you have some real estate projects there too.
I think that we've basically earmarked a project. I believe Rutgers University did a studio on Center City. That was one of the projects that I pushed because I wanted to make sure that we created an Asian sort of feel. The town is pretty diverse. We have many different eateries. We have many different cultural stores and things of that nature. So any town that flourishes, just like New York City, Chicago, Philadelphia, you can always go to an Asian town or a Chinatown. I think I like to use the term Asian because it actually keeps it wide open for Eurasia. I think that the area that we earmarked for that particular project is ideal. I think that anyone who came down to see the area, it's actually boardwalk and beach frontage. It's also beach block. You can just envision being able to walk off the boardwalk onto the beach, enjoy the beach, enjoy sunbathing, walk back off, have dinner, lunch. And it's just an opportunity that I think comes only once in a lifetime. In terms of Stockton University, in terms of its EB5, I believe the Stockton's project consists of over 30, 40 acres. I think that as the first phase is built, we're going to create a university district. I think that university district will also have areas where you can have new homes for faculty, new homes for some of the children that basically parents who want to have a home close to their children. I know that
I hear the parents are moving into the dorms, actually.
Absolutely. And it's much better than actually living or going to school in Georgia and something. And Mark, don't take this personal, but being able to actually enjoy the hot sun during the day and enjoy a cool breeze off the bay and ocean, I think that's something that's very applicable for folks that enjoy shore living. And if you want shore living, I think Atlantic City is a sure bet.
I would agree with that. I did my undergrad in a beach town. I did my grad school here in Atlantic City. Here I am, and here in Atlanta, where I live now. But yeah, I often miss the beach. In fact, I was planning to go in a couple weeks, but unfortunately, plans fell through. And I'm like, man, I miss the beach. So once you get a little bit of it, or even a lot, it's hard to get it out of your blood. You certainly,
absolutely,
want to get back. Well, Frank, you mentioned this university district as one facet of Atlantic City, coupled with casinos and a boardwalk, and really that kind of brings me to my question here, and it's a pretty broad question, so feel free to take as much time as you need. But what are some of the plans, and what is the vision for Atlantic City for the investor, not just EB5 investors, but all the other funding and the other avenues that you're seeking to revitalize the city? What are some of the plans and visions? What do you see as the result of that?
That's a great question. That's been asked time over again, and I don't think anybody has basically took the appropriate time out to really study that. Like I said, I've been the chairperson for planning and development for the last 6 years, so that's been an area that I concentrated on very thoroughly. I think Atlantic City, as we mentioned earlier, casinos closing was actually a blessing in disguise because it opened up boardwalk and beach frontage that normally basically was utilized just for gaming. We now can revert those things into condos, epic centers where you can have a high-end condo. You can have theaters. You have shows within those same structures. But the vision of Atlantic City, to me personally, is to, one, create various districts like innovation zones. Like, for example, we have investors that actually invest in technology. You can basically put innovation zones where you can show technology as in terms of how to build the most sustainable home, or how to build homes or structures that basically combat natural resources. You can also, in my opinion, I want Atlantic City to be one of the most smartest cities in terms of technology, because we are the home of 5 wind turbines. So we're one of the only cities in New Jersey that basically has wind turbines. As a matter of fact, we're the only city on the East Coast that have.
I was going to say that. I don't think there's many cities have wind turbines.
So to your point, Mark, I think that it's a very diverse question, but I think that, for one, Atlantic City's vision is to more or less stabilize our budget, which basically stabilizes taxes, and at the same time resurrect the housing stock. I think Atlantic City actually is a town that needs to revitalize its housing stock. I believe that because we have so many beachfront and inland opportunities for growth. We have Venice Park area. That's a quaint little area that reminds you of Venice Beach. You also have the Bungalow Park area. That's also synonymous to Venice Beach, where you have the canals and different forms of water flowing through.
Are we talking Venice Beach in Italy or Venice Beach in Florida?
Venice Beach in Italy.
Okay.
and it's actually an area of the city called Chelsea Heights. And we did a study with Princeton to more or less copy or emulate the process of allowing the water to flow through the town. So I think that the Carnegie Foundation and Princeton did a study that maybe at one point we'll look at that section of our city and just allow the water to encroach, but building it around that concept of sustainability. But Mark, from a standpoint of a vision, I think the vision is to basically bring a vibrant business district back to Atlantic Avenue. I think the vision should be building out the water frontage in terms of a second home market for maybe that empty nester or maybe the millennial who wants to pretty much jump on the train from Philadelphia and soon to come jump on the ferry from Manhattan to New York to Atlantic City.
Now that's another EB5 project in the works.
As well as the Wi-Fi to connect people while they're in transit.
Yes, and you bring up a very valid point. I would like to actually have Atlantic City be considered one of the greenest towns in the universe because we're only 48 blocks. 48 blocks is something that's very manageable in terms of converting things also, and looking forward to changing out all the lighting. As a matter of fact, we just received $2 million to convert all the city's lights from Cobra head bulbs to LED, which again, everyone knows that lighting makes things look safe. And we're beginning to look at how we basically implement surveillance and safety with each redevelopment project. Most folks want to know how their money is going to be protected.
Well, that's very important. I mean, you've answered my question there. When an EB5 investor puts their money in, even within a city, they do really want to know how is their money going to be protected.
It will be protected by making sure that there's a surveillance aspect to it. There's also a plan in place from the police department to have a police presence. And the beauty of Atlantic City, again, it's very diverse.
Yeah.
So you can almost basically envision any form of investment. But at the same time, we're open to having the diversity prove or help show Atlantic City how it could basically move forward in the future.
Frank, you are very passionate about Atlantic City. I don't think you're going to stop at being a councilman, right? What are your plans?
This may be a trick question, but I'll put it. You guys are one of the first to know it. I think that this will probably be my last time running as a council person. I think in 2017, I'm going to throw my hat in as the mayor. I believe that being a native of Atlantic City, I understand the needs and concerns of the city. Also have a passion, and one of the passions that EB5 connects to me is that creating job creation. I believe that development and growth creates jobs and also creates a more vibrant community. So I'm very excited to state that Frank Gilliam for mayor is soon to come.
Well, we'll support you.
Thank you.
Well, Frank, it sounds like natural forces, Superstorm Sandy, unfortunately, but also combined with market forces. Now you understand that perhaps there was more inventory of casinos than was needed in Atlantic City. And as you mentioned, it's also a diverse but limited resource. So you're talking about essentially 48 city blocks. So it sounds like a lot of planning is going in. As you mentioned, a lot of vision is going in for these 48 blocks with, you got bay views, ocean views, you got boardwalks, some casinos now, this university district. It definitely sounds that Atlantic City, although it's taken a hit with Superstorm Sandy, as many of us know, but it sounds like there's certainly a plan to take that, what was a negative, and really turn around and say, all right, now how do we use this as a reset, coupled with EB5 projects, as well as coupled with, other financing and revenue / tax resource credits that you can use to really revitalize the city. It does sound like a pretty interesting opportunity, not just for a foreign national, but even for a developer that wants to look at this and take this as an opportunity to come in, because the housing crisis of 2008, the financial crisis of 2009, 2010, maybe gone in 2011, that's behind us now. So those deals are gone. But this, we'll say, natural force reset of Superstorm Sandy and its, severe negative impact on Atlantic City, it definitely sounds like a unique opportunity to get into a well-known American city and to really revitalize it and make it a great location for both business and entertainment.
So, Mark, you hit it on the head. I believe that everything that has happened to Atlantic City has happened for a positive reason. I don't believe that anything that ever happens is happened by mistake. I think that Atlantic City is poised for greatness, as it's always been. I believe that the playground of the world should remain the playground of the world, and I think that at some point we'll work on getting that slogan back, because again, as we mentioned, it's so diverse. You have casinos, so that's the playground for the adults. You have the beach, that's the playground for the family and children. You have some of the piers, that's the playground for strictly children. I think that again, Atlantic City is a gem that needs to be shined back up, and before you know it, Atlantic City will have no room for any more investors. So all you investors out there in the real estate and the financial world, come on down and check out Atlantic City. Look at some of the open opportunities. And I think that you'll be very pleased with what you see. It's not like the Atlantic City is totally dead. We have areas like the Cove that has been built up. We have areas like Venice Park that's been built up. We have new bulkhead. Atlantic City has spent over $96 million in infrastructure. All of our we have new roads. We have brand new pumping systems. So again, Atlantic City is just at the cusp of becoming what she always been. And I'm excited to basically be a part of the transition.
Well, Frank, Mona, this episode is actually going to drop before the 4th of July weekend, before Independence Day. So let me ask you, are there any good Independence Day celebrations planned for Atlantic City?
Absolutely. We're going to be having a beachfront concert. Atlantic City always has the infamous fireworks. As a matter of fact, you'll be able to enjoy. Gotta have the
fireworks.
You have various artists at the Boardwalk Hall. You have artists that's going to be playing at the Beta Field. And another thing, I just need to pitch. We have one area of the city that I think is the gem of our town. It's called Beta Field. It's an old airport. It's over 130 acres of all bayfront, overlooking the expressway. I think that is the gem of the town. And if anyone has any kind of ideas or concepts that you think that could help Atlantic City, we're very open to that.
Yeah, and happy 4th of July to you, Mark.
Happy 4th of July, Mark.
Thank you, and happy 4th of July to you both. Thank you for being with us today on EB5 Investment Voice. The topics presented in this podcast is informational in nature and is not to be taken as specific legal advice. If you have questions on the topics presented in this episode or other investment immigration needs, please contact Mona Shah and Associates. Mona and her attorney staff can be reached at mshawlaw.com. That's mshawlaw.com. Or call the office at 212-233-7473. Don't worry about trying to write all this down, as it's already embedded in your podcast player of choice. The contact information and other valuable resources can be found there. I'd again like to thank Atlantic City Councilman Frank Gilliam for coming on today's show and providing us an insight into Atlantic City, which I hope answers the question, is the timing now perfect for Atlantic City with regard to EB5 developers and investors? I hope you have a great 4th of July weekend, and I look forward to you joining us on the next episode. Make sure you don't miss it by subscribing to the podcast. While you're at it, leave us a rating on iTunes. If you really found this episode valuable, share it with someone else that could benefit from this information. Until then, I'll see you on the next episode of EB5 Investment Voice.